Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're breaking down the Tuesday, January 2nd slate of college basketball DFS on DraftKings and Fanduel. We have really kind of focused on college football for about the past week and a half here on this channel, which is fine. It's been bowl season. College football playoffs are going on. But we've got a big-time college basketball slate here on Tuesday. And we're going to be kind of primarily focusing on college basketball from kind of here until the end of the season as well. Most of our content is going to be geared towards college basketball. So if you followed us for the college football content, welcome to college basketball season. We have got a really kind of college basketball is going to be picking up from here on out because schools are starting conference play, which means that you're going to see a lot of these teams, night in, night out on the slates over and over again. So you're going to hear me say some of the same names, keep track of some of the same situations, some of the same performances over and over again. And then also you're going to see shorter rotations for these teams. Like they're going to be playing their starters as much as possible because they need to win these conference games in order to better their resumes for that NCAA tournament when it kicks off in March. Now, if you are here for college basketball content, we do have other sports as well. So if you are interested in fantasy golf, we already recorded our preview and picks episode for the Century, which is this week's tournament. And we also did an episode where we talk about one and done fantasy golf, which is my favorite form of fantasy golf. So check that out if you are interested in joining a one and done league, or if you are looking for advice or tips for winning a one and done league. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode here today. I am recording this during halftime of the Texas game. If you've been a long-time listener, you know that I am a Texas Longhorns fan. So I'm not going to go into as big of a detail as I normally do here on this episode. It's going to be a little bit shorter, but I do want to hit all the high notes, all the information that you need to know to build some successful lineups for the Tuesday night slate. So we've got an 11-game slate. So let's go ahead and kick things off by breaking down Game 1, DePaul at UConn. All right, so the first game of the night is going to be DePaul taking on UConn, and this is actually probably one of the uglier games of the slate. According to KenPom, it is projected to finish 82-59 in favor of UConn, which gives UConn tied for the third highest total on the slate. It's also the most lopsided spread of the slate, according to KenPom, at 23 points. That's pretty staggering for a conference game. That means this is pretty much a lock to be a blowout. Now, for DePaul, the good news is that they play a super condensed rotation, so even though they're going to get blown out, the starters are still going to play heavy minutes through that blowout. Chico Carter and Deshaun Nelson continue to lead their team in usage. The two that I would be most interested in, though, are Elijah Fisher as well as KT Ramey. Fisher plays almost every minute, and he's got a pretty solid shot rate, whereas KT Ramey, he gets dual eligibility. He's pretty cheap, and he has shown the ability to hit 4 and 5x value for his price tag. So those would kind of be my primary interest for DePaul. It's hard to get too excited about a team who's projected to only score 59 points. The good news is that since they're literally so bad, that's not actually that far below their average. So, it's not like they're in a super duper, down projection spot from what they normally do. Now, on the UConn side of things, what you need to know is that Donovan Clingan is going to be out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. They have played one game without Clingan already, and they saw backup center Samson Johnson play 30 minutes against St. John's. He ended with 26 fantasy points. He's only 5,300. He is going to be very popular, and he is one of the best plays of the slate objectively. What Clingan being out also did was it gave more usage to Tristan Newton as well as Alex Caravan. So those guys are kind of at a little bit of a depressed price tag right now from what they were doing while Clingan was healthy. So I do have interest in both of those, with UConn being implied 82 points. The only thing is you want them to play a full 40 minutes. You don't want this game to be so lopsided that they end up, being subbed out with 15 minutes to go. The other guy that I'm interested in for UConn is Stefan Castle. This guy is a future lottery pick. He's really talented. Against St. John's, he played 26 minutes. He was inserted back into the starting lineup. He took 10 shots, ended with 8, 7, and 2, 19 fantasy points. I think that his value is going to continue raising upward, especially now that he's back in the starting lineup. So if I were to look at this objectively, the most likely guys from this UConn side that I'm going to play are Stefan Castle and Samson Johnson. The next game is Creighton taking on Georgetown. This is also a very lopsided game. It's projected to be Creighton 80-67, according to KenPom. Georgetown is like DePaul, they're not good. They're kind of the bottom dwellers of the Big East. Now, the problem with Georgetown from a DFS perspective, though, is they had a lot of guys step up and play very well when Jaden Epps was out. And so their price tags are kind of elevated because of that, which makes them very difficult to play now because Jaden Epps is back. And Jaden Epps, don't get me wrong, he is their best player. He is going to lead them in shots. 2 out of the last 3 games that he has played, he's taken 17 shots, which is quite a lot. So Jaden Epps, I actually kind of do like as a play. Even with them only being projected 67 points, he is this team's best player. He is going to take the most shots. And, if he gets hot, then he's going to give you pretty solid performance. Now, on the Creighton side, this is another team that it's very difficult to play guys for in DFS. The good news that they have going for them is they only really play 7 guys, and they're going to score a lot of points. They're projected 80 points. The problem is that kind of both of those things are kind of baked into the price tags for all these guys. Shireman and Alexander are 2 very good players who are very good options in fantasy, but they're priced up at a point where I'm not super excited about playing any of these Creighton guys, if I'm being totally honest. Game number 3 is a battle in the Big Ten. Iowa taking on Wisconsin. So this one is actually the highest game total of the night. We've got Wisconsin projected to win this one 84-75, which gives Wisconsin the highest team total of the night at 84 points. Largely, the reason why that is because Iowa ranks 14th nationally, but only 136th in defense. So this is a team that is going to get up and down and give you a lot of possessions and not really play a whole lot of defense while they're doing it. That makes this Iowa team pretty much the opposite of what Iowa's football team is. This is a team that you want to target in DFS. You want to play guys for and against Iowa. Whereas in college football, pretty much every time Iowa was on the slate, you could just put a big red X through it and just not play anybody from that game. Iowa's also done something super unique. They have gone to a 4-forward lineup with Patrick McCaffrey at the 2, Peyton Sanford at the 3, Ben Krikke at the 4, and Owen Freeman at the 5, with Tony Perkins as the only guard in the starting lineup. Now, since they have switched to that lineup, we have seen a big-time usage bump for Tony Perkins. So he would be the big guy that I would be interested in from this Iowa team. Owen Freeman, I think, is also a guy who's on an upward trajectory. His minutes tend to hover around 18 to 24, but he does have genuine upside that if he plays 24-plus minutes, he can legitimately get you 35 fantasy points, which he did in the last game against Northern Illinois. Now, on the Wisconsin side, you got to be interested in the team that has the highest team total, right? Wisconsin actually also plays a pretty big lineup. They have Stephen Crowell, a 7-footer at the 5, and Tyler Wall, who's a pretty big guy as well, playing the 4. So it's actually kind of a decent matchup with the Iowa lineup. The one thing I will say about the Iowa lineup is that since they've gone to this 4-forward lineup, you have seen guards kind of go off against Iowa with that lineup, just because the guys that they're playing at the 2 and the 3 aren't exactly the laterally quickest guys in the world. So you've kind of seen, guys that play the wing have a tendency to have a good night against Iowa just because they're able to get past their defender. So for Wisconsin, who could that possibly be? Well, for Wisconsin, they run a lot of their offense through Crowell and Wall, and those are their 2 big men, but Iowa has also been susceptible to big men throughout the last 2 seasons. So I actually think Crowell and Wall are firmly in play, but the guy that I like the most for Wisconsin is A.J. Storr. He's been a guy that for the most of the season I haven't been all that interested in, but and the reason why is because he doesn't do a whole lot else outside of score for you. But what's tended to happen lately is that his shot rate is so high. He's taking so many shots, and he's actually been pretty efficient from the field that he's able to give you a lot of fantasy scoring even without doing a whole lot else outside of scoring. And in a game where they're projected to score 84 points, you got to figure Storr's got a chance to go for 25 at only a price tag of $5,800. Also, one thing you do have to keep in mind with Wisconsin, Chucky Hepburn, their point guard, is listed as questionable heading into this game. They don't expect him to miss any games, but if you've ever played high-level basketball before, playing through a groin injury is pretty tough. So I definitely don't know if he will be at his maximum effectiveness, but if he is fully healthy, and he's a guy you got to consider. If he is not fully healthy, then I think that makes Storr a lot more interesting. I think you'll also see increased minutes for Connor Essegian, which can be very interesting as well. Now, the next game on the list is going to be Purdue taking on Maryland. Yeah, I'm going a little bit out of order on DraftKings just because this was how KenPom had it on their order. But this one is projected to be Purdue 76-66, one of the lower scoring games, one of the worst game environments of the slate for this one. And anytime Purdue is on the slate, you got to start talking about Zach Edey. And I'm not going to lie, I don't think this is the best spot in the world for Zach Edey. Maryland plays at a very slow tempo. Maryland also has a lot of big bodies that they can throw at him, one of which is Julian Reese, who is a pretty athletic, pretty solid defender and a really good rebounder. So I don't think this is the best matchup individually for Zach Edey at a price tag of $10,500. You're going to need him to get to about 45 points if you want, to get solid value out of him, and that's a pretty high goal. The only good news for Edey, though, is that his price tag's kind of lower than it has been because he hasn't played a whole lot in the second half of like any of the recent games. But when you look at his game log against better competition, when he's played a full minutes load, he's been really good and he's gotten you to the number that he needs to get to. So, I don't mind playing Zach Edey, but this isn't a slate where like I'm rushing to play Zach Edey. I don't think this is the best matchup or the best spot in the world. Now, one thing I will say also about Purdue is I think you got to consider Fletcher Lawyer if you are playing GPPs anytime they are on the slate. This guy can get hot with the best of them. And at only $5,400, he's had 2 performances this season, over 40 fantasy points. So I kind of think he's a guy that if you play multiple lineups and you're playing in GPPs, he should be in your player pool, even if for just 1 or 2 lineups, because he does have the potential to get scorching hot from the field and give you a huge performance. Now, on the Maryland side, one thing that I find interesting about Maryland is the Jahmir Young injury situation. We don't know if he is going to play or not. It was an illness that held him out against Coppin State. Generally speaking, for an illness, I would think that he probably would be able to play after a few days rest, but I'm not certain in that. He's a decently solid play if he does play. He's shown the ability to give you big-time fantasy performances, even when Maryland hasn't scored a whole lot of points, which is the good news because they're probably not going to score a whole lot of points in this one against Purdue. But if Young is in fact out, Jahari Long becomes one of the best plays of the slate. He filled in at point guard for Jahmir Young in that game against Coppin State and had 28.75 fantasy points, and he's only at $5,100 right now. Now, Wake at Boston College is the next game on the list. This one is one of the better game environments of the slate. It is projected to be Wake Forest 77-75. And look, I live about 15 minutes from Wake's arena. I have a friend who has season tickets to Wake games, and I watch a lot of Wake Forest basketball. This team is legitimately good. They have a starting 5 that can compete with the rest of the ACC, and I am very excited to watch this team as the season goes on. I am very excited to play this team in DraftKings as the season goes on, and play guys against this team in DraftKings as the season goes on, because Wake Forest gets up and down. They're going to play a lot of possessions. There's going to be guys who go off against them. Now, for Boston College, who might that be? Well, we have seen Claudell Harris be very improved lately for the Boston College Eagles. He's coming off of a 45 fantasy point performance against Lehigh, where he had 29 on 10 for 15 from the field, 7 for 10 from 3. To me, that is obviously a ceiling game, but at only $7,000 in a game that's going to get up and down, I don't think that's a bad option. And the reason why I don't think that's a bad option is because we've got to talk about Quentin Post. So Quentin Post is Boston College's best player. He is a center, and he distributes a lot. There's a very little bit of Jokic in his game. Like he's not going to bring the ball up the court, but they will get him the ball with his back to the basket in situations where he can be used as a passer to set guys up. And he's really good. He has a massive usage rate, and he has a massive ceiling. He has multiple 50 fantasy point performances this season. The bad news is for Quentin Post, though, is that Wake Forest used to be a team that we would target bigs against all season long, because they would play Andrew Carr at the 5, and Andrew Carr is not a big-time defender at the 5 position. But now Wake Forest has Efton Reed, Gonzaga transfer, who got the waiver to play as a 2-time transfer. And Efton Reed is an elite rim protector and elite shot blocker. The problem is, though, is what we're going to run into with Efton Reed is Efton Reed fouls a lot. So I think that this is a situation where, looking at this game, if I'm targeting Quentin Post, I am not going to play Efton Reed because it likely will mean if Quentin Post is playing well, Efton Reed is going to be off the floor. If I'm targeting Efton Reed, then that means he's going to be on the floor quite a lot. And so I don't necessarily think that would mean a good game for Quentin Post. I think both of those guys make for individually good plays. I don't think I would play Post and Reed in the same lineup. Now, why might Reed make for a good play, you ask? Well, he's only $6,000 on DraftKings, and he's played 5 games, 3 of which have been above 30 fantasy points. So massive upside for Efton Reed. And if you followed us for the last 2 seasons, Quentin Post, not exactly a good defender. He knows how important he is to the team, and so he avoids getting in foul trouble, which leads him to play not very physically down low. So Efton Reed has the potential for a massive game. I also think Andrew Carr has the potential for a massive game. Wake Forest, the good news is that they play their starting 5 a whole lot of minutes. Boopie Miller, Hunter Salas, Cam Hildreth, Andrew Carr, and Efton Reed. So I think all 5 of those guys are in play in a good game environment where you can play Claudell Harris or Quentin Post on the other side. This would be one game where I definitely think you can get some pieces from for your DFS lineups. Now, UNC at Pitt is the next game on the ledger. This one is also a pretty solid game environment, if I must say so. KenPom has it projected to be UNC 79 to 76. In my opinion, these two teams are pretty similar to each other. They're going to be able to stay in their comfort zone in this game. Both of these teams are teams who play 2 traditional bigs. Both of these teams are teams who like to get up and down and push the tempo. So this is a pretty solid matchup for both teams. They're going to be able to do what they normally do. Now, if you are a usage rate truther, if you're somebody who banks on usage rates and thinks that usage rates will lead to regression and will lead to fantasy scoring, then Blake Hinson should be your guy for this slate. He has a massive usage rate for Pitt. He just hasn't been very efficient, and he hasn't gotten as many boards as we're used to seeing from him in recent years. So if you are somebody who values the rates, then Blake Hinson is a guy you need to be getting into your lineups. If you're looking at a game stack of this game, then Carlton Carrington of Pitt is a guy that you need to be getting in your lineups. He's their point guard. He will fill up the stat sheet in a variety of ways. He averages over 5 assists per game, so if this game gets up and down and features a lot of scoring, there's a good chance that he's assisting on a lot of those buckets for the Pitt Panthers. Lastly, the third guy I'm interested in for Pitt is Guillermo Diaz-Graham, aka GDG. He has started the last 3 games, which is something that we had been monitoring since the start of the season because him and Federico had basically been playing 20 minutes each, which limited both of their upside. Well, recently you've seen GDG get a little bit more minutes, and in those last 3 games, he's been over 28 fantasy points every time, and he's averaging about 31 fantasy points in that stretch. He's only $6,200 on DraftKings. I expect him to be one of the chalky plays of the slate if people are able to figure that information out. Now, I also don't think the GDG is an elite defender, though. He's kind of skinny. He's not exactly like this big, strong, hulking rim protector. So Armando Bacot, who's like 24 years old, 280 pounds, grown man strength, Armando Bacot has a chance to have a good game going down low against GDG. Bacot has not been great lately, but they haven't really needed him to be great lately, with the exception of the Kentucky game, which was just kind of a weird game because he was kind of in foul trouble the whole game. So I kind of think Bacot could be due for a bounce back. We're not used to seeing him at a price tag of only $8,500 on DraftKings. The other guy you got to be interested in for Carolina is RJ Davis. He is really excelling without Caleb Love in the lineup, which is something that we talked about, leading into the season, how the usage for the guards for Carolina was going to break down. And he has over 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games in a great game environment. I think you got to be interested in RJ Davis here on this Tuesday slate. And then Carolina, they do give a lot of minutes to the rest of the starters: Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, and Elliot Cadu. So if you're looking to game stack it up, you know exactly who you need to target. All right, that does it for the first 6 games of the day. So let's take a quick breather before we break down the later games. Now, before we finish up with the last 4 games of the slate, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter, aka X, at Mike's Money Picks. I'll be more than happy to answer any lineup or start sit questions you have for me there, as well as any updates about the show, whether episodes are going to be on audio, video, postponed, whatever. You can find that all there on Twitter. I also do my best to tweet out the rundown for every college basketball slate, where I just kind of highlight some of my favorite categorical plays for each day. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Basically, the Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a lot of smart people who play a lot of DFS for a lot of different sports and have a lot of fun doing it. So basically all day we're just bouncing ideas off each other, talking strategy, talking lineups for college football, college basketball, NFL, NBA. We got all sports covered in there. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of. And, we kind of get to sweat it out together. And part of having fun playing DFS is sharing it with others. So if you're looking for people to talk DFS with, join the Fantasy Corner Discord. I also have on my Patreon a full article for every college basketball slate where I highlight my core plays as well as kind of my lineup strategy and attack strategy for the slate. I can't just sit here and guarantee that you can subscribe to the Patreon and just instantly win GPPs. It's not that easy, but I can guarantee that you can read those articles, give yourself some ideas, some building blocks to start off with, as well as some different ways of lineup building and strategies to give yourself successful lineups. There's not a whole lot of people doing things like this for college football and college basketball. So, if you want to read those, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. Lastly, if you're looking to try something new this college basketball season, I know it's January 1st, so some states had some laws go into effect. If you're looking to sign up for a new DFS, player prop or sportsbook site, head on over to signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. We're partnered with SignUpExpert, and what they do is they get you the best offers and promo codes for new users for any DFS player prop or sportsbook site, and it'll even sync to your location to show you what's available in your state or province. That's for my Canadian folks. And so if you're looking to try something new, get yourself that best offer and promo code at signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. All right. So now let's go ahead and talk about the nightcap, starting with the Butler-St. John's matchup. This is, again, a very solid game environment, projected to be St. John's 79-75, according to KenPom. For Butler, this is a revenge game for Posh Alexander. He played a few years at St. John's. Now he is playing against them. So you got to, if you're a narrative kind of person, you got to play him for that reason. But look, other than the narrative, he's Butler's best player. He fills up the stat sheet in a variety of ways, and this is a game environment that's very juicy. I think he makes a lot of sense at a salary of $7,000. Now, for Butler, you've also seen them kind of condense the rotation a little bit as Big East play has started. You've also seen the shot rates for Pierre Brooks and DJ Davis go up. So I think those two guys would be in place, certainly if you were looking to game stack this game. And then another guy who's trending upward is Landon Moore. He's only $4,300 on DraftKings, and he's playing more minute totals than he did at the start of the season. And when he's in there, he is shooting. He's taken at least 6 shots in 3 straight games, grabbed 2 boards in at least 3 straight games. So this is a guy that I could definitely see at 4,300 in a good game environment. Maybe he gets hot from the field. Maybe he gives you like 20 or so fantasy points in about 20 minutes. I think he's not a bad option at $4,300. Now, on the St. John's side, everything begins and ends with the health of Chris Ledlum. So Chris Ledlum is one of their better players. He generally plays the 4. It's kind of weird that he gets guard and forward eligibility on DraftKings. So he did not play in the Hofstra game due to a sprained ankle. Kind of like for what I said about Chucky Hepburn, it's hard to play basketball on a sprained ankle with all the jumping and landing and planting that you have to do. It's quite painful. So I don't necessarily expect Chris Ledlum to play in this game. And I think if he doesn't, I think that opens up a whole lot of value on the St. John's side. In the game that he missed, it turned into the Dennis Jenkins and RJ Luis show. Dennis Jenkins with 44 fantasy points, RJ Luis with 30 fantasy points. And for Luis, that was while going 2 for 10 from the field. So I think there's a lot of upside for both Jenkins and Luis if Ledlum ends up not playing. We also saw a good game from Jordan Dingle, who had 25 fantasy points on 3 for 10 shooting. Or 3 for 10 from 3, 4 for 13 from the field, which is still not great. So basically, Ledlum being out led to all these other guys having big-time games, except for Joel Soriano, who only had 17.5 fantasy points. That one puzzled me because on paper, it seems like Soriano would be one of the biggest beneficiaries of a Ledlum injury. Chris Ledlum is an elite rebounder on both ends of the floor. Joel Soriano is an even better rebounder on both ends of the floor. So it would stand to reason that if Ledlum wasn't there to get all the boards, Soriano would be able to get more of them. It just didn't work out that way on Saturday, but I'm kind of willing to go back to Soriano just from the whole logical standpoint of if Ledlum's not getting boards, Soriano should be getting more boards, right? But other than that, I think you can definitely bank around Jenkins and Luis if Ledlum does in fact miss this game. Those would be 2 of my favorite plays of the entire slate. Next up is Northwestern taking on Illinois. This one is projected to be Illinois 76-66. Northwestern is they're not playing great basketball lately. Their two best players, Brooks Barnheiser and Boo Buie, have not been great lately. They just haven't been objectively very good. And so, if they're looking to kind of get back to where they were at the start of the season when they beat Dayton, when they beat Purdue, I think those two guys need to get back going again. However, in their little skid, Ty Berry has picked it up. Ty Berry actually has back-to-back games of 30 or more fantasy points, and he's done it in a different ways, scoring 12 points in one and grabbing 10 boards, and then scoring 20 points in the next one. So Ty Berry, I think, is a very intriguing option if the usage continues. However, the bad news is, I don't know if they necessarily want that usage to continue because they haven't been playing all that well. Aside from Barnheiser, Bowie, and Berry, the rotation has been changed around a lot. The usage has been changed around quite a lot. So I'm not super interested in any of the Northwest guys other than those three. Now, on the Illinois side, Terrence Shannon Jr. is not going to play in this game as he tends to a legal matter. And they played one game without him. The bad news is in that game, they scored over 100 points. So everybody for Illinois is priced up based off of that, 100-point outing that they had, and everybody scored a lot of fantasy points. So how can we kind of parse through that to see what is real and what is fake? Well, I think Hawkins and Guerrier are playable with or without Terrence Shannon in the lineup. Those are Illinois' two bigs. They're both really solid. They both fill up the stat sheet in a variety of ways. But what you saw more of in terms of on-ball usage was you saw a lot of on-ball usage for Marcus Domask. He had 11 assists in their most recent game. And then you saw a lot of usage for Ty Rodgers as well, running more of the point. He actually ended up with 15 boards in that game against Fairleigh Dickinson. So Domask and Rodgers definitely have my interest here on this slate. And don't count out Justin Harbin. He's a transfer from Utah Valley who was kind of not doing a whole lot at all, but he had 25 fantasy points against Fairleigh Dickinson on 18 minutes. He's kind of back in the rotation, so I think he's a guy that you got to consider as well. Syracuse and Duke is next up. This one is projected to be Duke 83-69, according to KenPom. Syracuse is a hard team to figure out. So on the season, Judah Mintz is still their usage leader, and I complained for about the first month of the season about how Judah Mintz was overpriced. Well, I think it's now swung the other way, and I think he's actually a little bit underpriced. So I'm definitely willing to go to Judah Mintz at only $7,900. But in recent games, Quadier Copeland has been their best player, and I'm not gonna lie, watching Syracuse, Copeland is pretty good. I think it's only a matter of time before he is this team's lead guy over Judah Mintz. And in the last three games, he's kind of been that. So if you think that he can continue what he's done in those last three games where he's averaging about 36 fantasy points and, over 31 fantasy points in each game, if you think he can continue that, then roll him out there every night at $7,200. After that, you kind of just get a bunch of guys that randomly go off for Syracuse out of nowhere. Benny Williams is a guy who is seeing his minutes increase a little bit. He's been over 16 fantasy points in three straight, 27 fantasy points in their last game against Pitt. On the Duke side, this is a team where kind of like who was it that I talked about earlier, where everybody was priced up? Georgetown. It's kind of like Georgetown, where Tyrese Proctor was out. All their guards played really well while he was out, and now they're priced up, and Tyrese Proctor is back. So Proctor would be my main interest at the guard spot for Duke. He didn't do a whole lot against Queens, but they didn't really need him to. And I think in a conference matchup, they're going to roll him out his normal minute load and his normal usage. But I think you always have to be interested in Filipowski anytime he's on a slate. He has legitimate 60 fantasy point upside. And on a slate where you also have Zach Edey, Armando Bacot, Joel Soriano, I think Filipowski could go a little bit overlooked, and I think that makes him even more appealing in tournaments as he can go a little bit lower owned. The last game of the night is going to be New Mexico taking on Colorado State. This one is projected to be 82-77 in favor of Colorado State, according to KenPom. That makes it the second highest game total of the slate. Now for New Mexico, Donovan Dent is their best player. He is questionable for this game. I do not know if he is going to play. If he is out, it makes me super interested in Jalen House as well as Jamal Mashburn. They saw massive usage rates last game while Donovan Dent missed. So those would be my primary interest, is those two guys. On the Colorado State side, Isaiah Stevens is their point guard, and he's turning into a National Player of the Year candidate. He averages about 17 assists per game, so I really like Isaiah Stevens in games that get up and down and feature a lot of scoring. If you look at his game log, he tends to be pretty correlated where when a game gets to a higher total, he has a higher fantasy point total. So I think Isaiah Stevens is objectively one of the better plays of the slate at only $7,700. After that, they've had a lot of guys come in and out of the lineup with injuries. To me, Patrick Cartier has some upside at $5,400. He has some 5X performances in him. And it would not shock me to see him, have another one in this up-paced game against New Mexico. What's weird is that Jalen Lake is listed as questionable because they said he was going to miss the rest of the non-conference schedule. He played in their most recent game against Adams State. He actually started in that game, and so I think he has interest from me at $4,300 with all the other guards being out for them. Another guy that's interesting, DraftKings does not have the game log correct for Taviante Jackson. It's because in some places he goes by Tavy Jackson. I don't know what is going on with that, but he was starting before Jalen Lake got healthy. So he is a guy that's going to play a decent amount of minutes, and I think he is an option, but not the sexiest option by any means. All right, that does it for this Tuesday, December 2nd college basketball slate. We broke down 10 games in about 28 total minutes. That's pretty solid. So if you want more information from me, follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. Link to the fantasy Discord is in the description, as well as the articles on the Patreon. And then lastly, make sure you hit that subscribe button to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of college basketball season, as well as get the rest of our weekly golf and NFL content as well, if that floats your boat. So that is pretty much what we got for today, guys. We're going to be try to get as many episodes for the college basketball slates through the end of the week as we can. Now that conference play starts, we should be getting a genuinely good slate night in and night out. And so I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to getting back on here talking college basketball pretty regularly. So if you made it to the end of the episode and you like what you saw, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio feed. It really does help me out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. It does not fall on deaf ears, and it really does help more than you guys could ever know. And hopefully I was able to give you guys some good information that you can use to build some winning DFS lineups for this Tuesday college basketball slate. So best of luck to you in all your DFS contests. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you next time.